we see the shepherd guarding his flock. He's sitting in the evening looking up at the sky, and he sees the moon, and through the days he realizes it's waxing and waning in size, and it's moving slowly across the sky, and he realizes, oh, from it's gone until it's half, it's kind of like 7 days. And then from half till full, it's kind of like 7 days again. And he realizes that this might be a way to reckon the passage. He has his wakes, he has his sun up and sun down, and he can keep reckoning of the month loosely based on the phases of the moon. Contrary to today, where we are slaved away, at least some are, by the second hand, this is quite the difference in how we perceive time. So what I alluded to in my earlier presentation, I met a cabinet maker while doing some television for Danish television, repairing antiques, and we had a talk about how clocks are being less and less relevant, and what we could do about it to make them more relevant. And we decided to create this clock for this exhibition where the poster is here. It's the Cabinet Makers Autumn exhibition, and it's been there now for 45 years in Copenhagen. Or 65 years. It's been there for many years now, and it's usually chairs and other types of furniture. But if you are a member of the academy, you can present anything. You don't have to apply. You just show up at the exhibition day with your piece of furniture. And these two girls, one with which I met at the TV show, they're Isabel Am and Signe Lund. I met Signe at the TV show, and they run a design studio, and they do a lot of experimentation with furniture design, and they've worked a lot with light and with like making lamps and stuff like that, but also tables and stuff like that. And they are members of the academy, so we thought the theme for the exhibition this year, it changes every year. It was time, tact, and tone. This is in Danish, so it's tid, takt og tone. But time, tact, and tone, we thought this idea of creating a modern clock, it would fit into this. So we used this as an excuse to skip all our responsibilities and try and work for creating something for this. Let's see. And the thing is, as David has said many times this symposium, being a clockmaker and a watchmaker can be kind of lonely. And especially if you're very dedicated to your craft, you work a lot in a very focused state of mind, and the hours just pass by. So actually meeting some people who wanted to create something where I could share my craft in like a professional collaboration, it really thrilled me, which was also one of the things that made me say yes, because this was in February of 2021, and the exhibition was in November of 2021. And in that time, I also needed to make some money to pay for rent, and we had to shoot another season of that television show, and we also had to make a concept for a clock, construct the clock, construct the movement, and produce it, and set it up for the exhibition. So these 8 months or so, it's not a long time. So the idea we turned to was thinking back to the shepherd in olden times. He didn't have a better life than us. Modern life is pretty cool, but he had another sense of time, and modern time can be very stressful in some sense, and it can be quite cut off from our surroundings. And we wanted something that puts us in another relation with our surroundings, with how time passes. And I feel like that clocks are a very good medium for passing on emotions to the viewer, like art, and that's why that's what we wanted to do with this clock. And before I begin talking about the process and our thoughts, I might say something about what the clock is, because this is the clock from many different angles, all the way around. It's a tall case clock. It's almost 2 meters. I'm not sure what that is in freedom units. It's 6 foot something. I hear. Yeah. It weighs 150 kilos, so that's 300 pounds. It's a month going regulator, and it has no other indication than the phases of the moon. So you wind it up once a month, you set the pendulum swinging, and you keep up time with the moon. So you can see here, this is sped up. So it works through light and shadow on a curved porcelain sphere, driven by the movement. So it's part clock, it's part sculpture, it's part lamp in some sense. It's not very bright, but it's bright enough to see this. So I touch a little bit about the philosophical idea. So modern life, at least in some sense, is fast, fragmented, and stressful. And the moon is a symbol of the opposite. It's the slow cycle. It's not so slow like, I don't know, Saturn's motion around the sun, like where it'll move like this in our lifetime. It's fast enough that we feel it. It's slow enough that it feels natural. And in some cultures, the moon is called the original timekeeper, because we evolved around with the moon moving around on the sky. So the goal we wanted to convey with this clock was to make people reconnect with a slower rhythm, a more, in some sense, natural rhythm, and also feel a bit more belonging in the moment instead of focused on the next second, on the next minute, or the next appointment here, which a clock is a very good instrument for conveying that emotion. And we wanted something that conveyed another emotion. We wanted to create a timepiece that didn't measure productivity, but invited us into the presence. So this is me and Signe admiring a Norton sharpening stone. It's a very good stone. No, but this was taken from the TV show. I went on the TV show quite reluctantly. Like I went to the US. I was like, who wants to hear my story? Like a bunch of Americans, they have bigger cars, they probably earn more money. What can I bring to them? And I had the same thing about, okay, so I'm on TV. I really just want to be in my workshop doing watches and clocks. But then I realized saying no to nationally syndicated advertisement, basically, it was stupid not to. So I went along, and I got a lot of attention, and I got a lot of work out of it, because people saw me being semi-stupid on TV, but somehow I was charming in a sense, and I came across as very competent. So I got a lot of work from doing it, but what I really got was a massive boost to my professional networks, because we were maybe 6, 7, 8 different experts, depending on on the episode, and we worked in a lot of different fields. And I met Signe, and we talked about there are so many pieces of furniture. Well, I came to her half trying to provoke her and half like genuinely meaning it, that there's so much furniture today that has less relevance and practical use than a tall case clock has, but it's still being produced. It's made in different designs, sold for a lot of money, shown in all these interior decorating magazines. So it's relevant because somebody does it, and nobody does a modern clock. Nobody shows how you can use an antique clock in decoration, and that is why it's slowly drifting into the past instead of like there are still companies making secretaries, and if you have a desk, you don't need a secretary. So she actually agreed with it, and she was like, we should do a clock. And I was like, yeah, of course we should do a clock. Anybody says to me, you should do a clock, we'll do a clock. And it felt like kind of like an easy thing to say, yeah, we'll do it, and whenever. And then all of a sudden, 3 months later, they turn around and the exhibition publishes the theme, which is time, tact, and tone. And they're like, Rune, this is a clock. This theme is a clock. We should do it. And I said, yeah, okay, let's go for it. So we started a collaboration on this project, and it was actually it was very much in vein of how David has been working and how clockmakers have been working for a long time. It was a cabinet maker talking with a clockmaker, talking with I guess let's call it was a stone cutter, like big stones, but that's not very traditional. But this sense of like the cabinet maker with the clockmaker, it's a classic combination, and that's why I think it also felt quite easy to fall into this collaboration, because that's just two fields that interact very well because they've done so for a long time. And I came along with the ambition to do something that pushed the envelope a bit and challenged the norms, because I feel like that's fun and it grabs attention in a way. It's nice to do a classical clock, for example, and build it, and there's a lot of skill required, and the result can be very beautiful, but I wanted to do something different, to experiment. I wanted to see what can I make out of it. And that's sort of like the same approach that the two women that I worked with had with their furniture, that they wanted in some sense to push the boundaries, which made it a very good collaboration. So this project really turned out to be a meeting point between both tradition and experimentation and different materials, because I'll get into it in a second, but we ended up using some not very traditional materials for a cabinet maker to make a tall case clock case. So when I list off, if I should do like a short explanation of the clock, I usually say it's a 2 meter tall standing tall case clock made of black clay, stainless steel, black basalt, and Parian porcelain, which are not materials I usually equate with clockmaking. And these materials were not just picked out willy-nilly, even though they're cool materials to list off. It's not the reason we chose them. We had this theme about the moon, and we wanted to convey this slow moon cycle onto the beholder. So we chose the black clay to give this textured surface that you see up here. It's made in a big form where you can work in black clay. It's a technique I know nothing about because I didn't do it. Signe did it. She went to study with a very famous ceramics master in Copenhagen, who's called, of all things, Michael Jackson. But she learned this technique. So the black clay was symbolizing the volcanic rock, and the cratering surfaces on the dark side of the moon. Then we have the porcelain sphere in the front, which was a self-glazing porcelain, so when you fire it, it actually glazes over slightly, and the surface that it made resembles the moon surface, and when you light it up with a quite bright light source, it begins to glow kind of like the moon. The stainless steel ribbon was mainly to get strength, and it was powder coated black, so it wouldn't really interfere with the aesthetic. It kind of gets lost in what happens, and I don't know if you can imagine. This thing here is maybe this size, and it's a wall thickness like this of black clay. There's a movement inside with 400 millimeter brass plates, 3 millimeters thick, too. It has big mainspring, some gearing and stuff. It's very heavy. So when we did the first drawing, the girls, they went to a statistician who works with like the uprightness of things, and he said, if you put this on a foot like that and you press it with less than some minute force, it's going to fall over. So we had to change the base of the clock, and it ended up being carved from a single piece of black basalt rock, which is the same rock that's on the moon. So it was actually carved in one piece, and it's very heavy to counteract the top heaviness. So every choice was both practical, but it also led through the goal of evoking an emotion. So this is not just for aesthetics, it's not just for the practicality, it's also geared towards conveying an emotion. And this is something I think is very vital in this artisanal type of clockmaking. So one of the biggest things when you're using clockmaking or watchmaking as a way of expressing or conveying an emotion, it is to play with the indication, because a normal clock shows hours, minutes, seconds, can show the date and can show other things, but they are arranged in this typical way. You have the long minute hand, a short hour hand, a thin seconds hand, so there is like this natural visual priority of the different things. But then if you remove something, or you blow something up and make it very visible, you are highlighting something, you are hiding something, you are actually, in some sense, at least for the emotion of the beholder, playing with their sense of time. And time is one of the most fundamental things that affect us people, so it's a very powerful symbol to play with. So not only do we have the aesthetics, the material choices we talked about earlier, we can also play around with people's feeling of time, so it can become a very potent medium for expressing and conveying an emotion. And this is the reason why we went this rather arrogant way of making a month-going regulator with a Graham deadbeat escapement, carbon pendulum rod to keep it kinda temperature compensated, and then we removed everything we could do to actually see the accuracy, because it's a nightmare to regulate, because I have no second hand to look at, and it takes days for this to move over. But this duality between a very precise instrument and a very give or take indication is also chosen to convey this emotion. So if we talk a bit about the work I really did, because I was in on the whole concept and choosing materials, but what I really worked on was constructing this movement and producing it, and it ended up being done on the go, because I don't know how many of you have built clocks, but when you start down one road and you think you have a plan, you end up figuring out, oh, this screw hole is actually where this thing is going to pass, or some stupid thing like that, and you have to move things around. So it was quite a chaotic process, really, because before we had all the material choices and we had all the choices that affected the movement, we had used some months, so now it's summer, and in autumn I need to have this produced, running, regulated, and ticking for the exhibition, so I was feeling the pressure. And a design process is not linear, so we went a long time wanting to do a weight-driven clock, and then after 2.5 months, something like that, we shouldn't have any weights at all. And I was like, okay, so we're now trying to make a spring-driven regulator. It's doable, but not very nice. So I really had some challenges coming up and working on said clock. To make it, I might as well say something overall. To make it, I had some things I knew. Okay, I'm going to do that. I wanted to reduce the amount of oil used in the mechanism as much as I could, which meant roller bearings wherever I could. I later found out some things about roller bearings I'll talk a bit about later. And I wanted to be deadbeat escapement, and we had this idea for a shadow caster which had to be mounted more or less centrally in the movement. So these were the constraints I started with, and we also wanted it to be an experience to look at the movement, because when it's standing and it has the porcelain sphere on top, you only see the indication, but once a month you have to remove the porcelain sphere, you have to wind the clock, and when you remove it, we wanted to have this like new world opening up. So at the start I made the wheels like 1 millimeter in module, and it was just like this huge space with these small wheels, and it wasn't very impressive. So I ended up enlarging the wheels so we filled out more of the space, and that was the main things I thought about while starting to construct this. And we usually say that we stand on the shoulder of giants, and I really did, because I thought I might as well look at the British Museum, because they're very good at taking their clocks and counting all the trains. And I found a regulating clock from Graham which had been functioning for 300 years, and I thought he might have got the wheel count right. So I copied the wheel count of a Graham regulator. And then I needed some sort of gearing to get the shadow caster to make a rotation once every synodic period. And the synodic period actually changes over time, but there are some very smart people in some universities who has made like an approximation that over a long period of time is a good average. And it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's 29.5 days, 45 minutes, 12 seconds, and then some fraction of a second. So then it's just starting with your 3rd grade math, and because I'm not very good at math, I also used a calculator, and I just tried different things to get this to have some sort of offshoot of the gear train, where I ended up with a wheel that made a rotation in one synodic period, or as close as I could get it, because I also had some constraints in space, because it needed to be in another plane than the other wheels, so I couldn't just do a massive one. I ended up with the help of a computer program, because I got tired of calculating, so I got my friend who is very good with software to make a computer program that tried all the different wheel counts, and it spit out like, if you do it like this, it'll be 1 second off every 100 and something years, which is very close for a moon indication, because to actually see the moon shift, you need a lot of seconds. But I think it required 6 or 7 wheels or something. So I actually, after all that work, I went back to the classical one that is 1 day off in 120 years. It's the one that's used in most also wristwatches and stuff like that, because it's a very good and simple approximation. And I figured out that if this is the train and this is the barrel, and if I put this little pinion on the barrel and drive this crown wheel, which is connected by friction to this little wheel and connected to this, it works, and it's a good approximation. So that is what I ended up choosing for the wheel train. And then we had to work on the shadow caster. So this is the most beautiful silversmithing work I've seen ever. it's one of this shadow caster that we ended up calling it. It's made by a friend of Sina and Isa, who is of all things, she's a trained machinist, she's a model, and she's a singer, but she's also a goldsmith and silversmith. And she actually beat this out of a panel of silver, and she cut off the top, and she soldered this piece in. And very reluctantly, I had to place these 4 holes in her days of work, but it turned out good. So this is what's driving. It's being driven by the clock movement, and through this big bearing in the center, there is a post through, which has a LED oriented that illuminates the whole sphere, and the movement turns this around the sphere, creating the shadow that's cast following the moons. So there's one problem with this thing. I don't know if anybody can see the problem. If we are having inside, around here, we'll have an LED illuminating out, filling the whole sphere, and then this going around. Don't know if anybody can tell me what the problem is. No, the wires, it's actually not a problem, because I just draw them through the center. It's a way, way worse thing. Huh? Yeah, so you're onto the right thing, because when we turn the light on, there is the wheel on the top of the moon. And when I realized that, I've actually never felt more stupid in my life. Because of course there's a wheel in front of it, and it's going to cast a shadow. And as you can see, because we turned it off when it was set up for testing, so we were quite late in the process. And in Danish we say, "God råd er dyre," and that means that good advice is very expensive. So I really had to figure out what to do, but we ended up doing something crazy. I milled a wheel out of leg sand. Yeah, and it turned out very good, and it's actually very easy to machine as well. The only thing is the light is catching a little bit on these milled edges, but it's almost nothing compared to the other thing. So we set it up as being good enough. And then I alluded a bit to the fact that we wanted weights. They wanted weights in the design at the start, and all of a sudden we wanted a singular pendulum. So what do you do if you want constant force? You use a constant force spring. I don't know if any of you know how these work. So normally you have the spiral clock spring where you wind it in and it winds out, and it has this normal, very traditional curve of no power going up, quite okay stable power, and then goes up again. And it works by tightening the coils and the coils releasing again. A constant force spring is actually wound up and hardened, wound up, so the spring wants to be like this. And then you need a keeper barrel and you need a driving barrel. So you connect the end to the other barrel, you wind it over the other barrel, and you force it from being wound up to being stretched out and like this, which means the force the spring generates is going from being stretched this way to going back to this. And it almost doesn't change at all from one side to the other, only a little bit because the diameters change as you wind it from one barrel to another. But the motion that gives the power is almost constant, so the spring is practically constant. And it turned out to be a very good system, other than you need double up on spring barrels because you need a keeper barrel and you need a driver barrel. But this was something I found out reading old articles in the Horological Journal. And in the 80s and early 90s, I think it was Anthony Randall, he did a lot of work on different types of experimentations. And one of the things was he used these springs. And he got very good rates out of a carriage clock with it. It's kind of hard to get today, but it's used a lot in two things. Seat belts, that's why a seat belt is the same force when you pull it just a little bit, and when it's pulled all the way out, it's because it's one of these springs that retracts it. And so a lot of automotive suppliers have them. And then also in these movable barriers where you pull out a thing and you connect them together in the airport. They have these springs, and they're usually from a brand called Tensata, at least in Europe. And it was a lot of fun to try and get this to work, because it's not, in theory it's simple, but you realize that when you're winding from one barrel to another, at some point it needs to stop, because else it needs one wrap in each end to actually not force the mounting out of the barrel. So I had to devise a stop work that worked and kept one turn of the spring on it. And I ended up doing this cutout where I can bolt on the thing, and then I have a little arm here. I think it's on one of the other pictures, and it rests with a weight on here, and as the spring is wound, it goes down, 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 down. And then when the last thing just removed, it drops down and locks on this corner here. And I had to have one on each side, because on the other way back it also needs to stop. And in reading all of these old horological journal articles from the British Horological Institute, I also found a savior for me, because this is 2 chatons, one for a bearing, ball bearing on top here, and it's a normal ball bearing, and it can run dry. You need to clean it out before you're running it dry. You cannot run it with the grease it has from the factory, but they're very picky about how to be cleaned. If you put a bearing in an ultrasonic, you kill it instantly. So they were washed out, and they were like actually cleaned in a parts cleaner, like an old rotary parts cleaner. But one thing in the long term ball bearings don't like is not making full revolutions. So what are we going to do with the pallets? Because it's a reciprocal motion. And then I found a very interesting article where they are experimenting with different types of bearings, sliding bearings, and some very cool, kind of modern materials. And it has a very cool modern name, like Nylatron. I don't know if any of you have heard about Nylatron. It's one of the wonder materials of the modern age. It's more or less just Delrin, and when you take Delrin and you extrude it out, you mix the chemicals, it reacts and polymerizes, and you extrude out the thing. If you stand there and you dump molybdenum disulfide powder into it while you extrude it, you get Nylatron. And when you machine Nylatron, it's like machining Delrin. It's literally like drilling through it. It's just like, and you have a hole. But the surface you've machined exposes all of these particles of molybdenum disulfide, and the bearing that's going to ride on it is actually riding on the molybdenum disulfide. If it runs on the Delrin part, it'll wear it away very quickly until it's fully supported on the molybdenum disulfide. So it ends up being a dry lubricated bearing. And the friction coefficient of a burnished stainless steel pivot in a Nylatron hole is the same as a burnished, jeweled, and oiled hole, which means you can run it dry and it has very low coefficient of friction. Yeah, so that was a very interesting rabbit hole to go down, but it would have been more interesting if I weren't under so much time pressure. So that's how it goes. One of the last things I did is one of my favorite things. I don't know if it's novel in any way, but I made this beat setting pendulum suspension. I really hate these suspensions or these crutches or whatever, where you can set the beat, where you have to stop the pendulum, because I have no live feedback. It's like it's going, oh, it's too much, and you flick the little thing, or you screw the thing, and you start it again, and you have no feel of how much or how little you've done. So what I did was I mounted the thing in, if it can change, I mounted hello, there. So I mounted it on a threaded rod that fits very snugly. It takes a bit of fitting to get it very snug. It runs in this little bridge, and when I turn the ends of this, I move it. I move the origin point, and I can just set the clock going and turn the thing until it's in beat, and Bob's your uncle. It's very awesome. The last thing, I spoke a little bit about it earlier. We wanted this thing where we opened the clock to wind it, that it opened up. And so I had to skeletonize at least the front of the plates. And you can sit and draw, and I found out recently there is a whole tradition and a lot of rules for skeletonizing, like correctly, and that's why modern skeletonizing looks kind of awful, and the ones from the 20s or 1920s and maybe the late 1800s, they look amazing. It's because they're following a set of rules. But I've only learned that this year. But back then I thought, I'll try something new. I used something called iterative topology to figure out what is the least amount of material I can have and still support all the forces. So this is from the generative design workspace in Autodesk Fusion, and it's very cool. You set up the part with all these holes, and you define all the forces that is going to act on it. And you also have to define gravity, and you also have to, like every single force that you could imagine, you have to define. It cannot think by itself. But then it just starts by taking the part, removing a little thing, measuring the strength, like doing a finite element analysis, and then it removes a little more, does it again. Did it become better? It'll keep doing that. If, oh, now it's losing strength, it'll go back. So it just runs and runs and runs. And this one is with quite a big safety factor. It's more or less just a plate. And this is almost without any safety factor. And we all can see that this is not going to work at all, and that's because I don't have all the forces that's actually going to interact with the part. But it gave me an idea, because most of the time it did sort of like the same thing. It made a pattern that was sort of like the same thing. So I ended up being inspired by that pattern and doing a thing there. So this was the design I ended up with, inspired by the shapes from that, and then adding one or two places and removing something else because the other thing looked a bit ugly, an alien almost. But this was a way to try and maximize how much visibility we had, but also to not think about doing a nice design, because I could always say, oh, that's what the computer said. No, but in reality, it turned out quite nice. So I touched a little bit on this before. The clockmaking, I really see it as a medium, and this also goes as well as watchmaking. Every part of the clock can have a purpose, and it's traditional that movement design has been very utilitarian. This part needs to be shaped like this to have the strength to convey a motion in this direction, all these things, and you still need this. But if you have the time and you have the resources and you have a goal of expressing something, every choice you make can be something alluded to in that sense. So we were thinking a lot about sounds. At one point we wanted something that made we wanted a very slow pendulum and like big sounds, so it would be like this chung chung. We scrapped that idea for other reasons, but sounds, shapes, surface finishes, placement of things, all these things are actually modes of expression, and if you align all of them, or as many of them as you can practically, you turn a utilitarian thing as a clock movement into an artistic thing that effectively conveys emotion. And most of my creative career as a watchmaker has relied on storytelling, also on craftsmanship and quality of work, but in a large sense, storytelling is what brings people into watches and clocks and all these things. And if the clockmaker is a bit courageous and wants to scrap some of the things that are usually done or that looks nice or this, and try and bring the story into more aspects, you can make a more authentic product, and you can make a product that is more tempting for a collector to interact with or own. And this will really change the way you do clocks, and I think it might be vital for keeping clockmaking, at least creative clockmaking, alive in a broader sense going forward, that you at least think about what stories am I going to tell with this thing? What emotion am I going to impart on the beholder or the owner or the potential buyer? And it ties into the thing I talked about on Thursday about clockmaking, watchmaking, horology in general is all-encompassing. It has design, art, history, science, craftsmanship, all these things. And so it seems obvious to me we should bring more of all these related fields into the actual design and shaping of the clock. So this is us after doing the clock, and we are very tired. And this is the biggest thing I took away from this. I talk about it now like it's a thing that I strongly believe in, and I really only strongly believe in it because I got the idea while we were working on this clock. I saw how effective it was, how great response I got from exhibiting this for the Fancy Design Elite of Copenhagen, and how they were relating to a clock in a different way I haven't seen before, and people were very awestruck when they were watching it, and some of the people came back and back to look at it. And that is what I began to do in my later creative work, and it's been working for me. So this thing taught me both the value of collaboration, bringing in other aspects into clockmaking, but also how you can use it as an effective mode of communication and conveying emotion for people. Yeah, so this is how it is, just standing there. And all this led me to think about what I'm going to do in the future, and what I've been doing since then is trying to get authenticity and emotion into all my work, because the reception has been so great. It's much more fulfilling for me to be able to do a meaningful product. It's much more it adds so much more value for the customer to buy something like this. So this really set the track for my creative work. It's been years now, and some of the things I would do differently today technically, but the concepts behind it and the ideas about conveying emotion in clockmaking haven't changed at all. Clockmaking, it is a language, it's a way of expression, and Moonwork, my first attempt with Sina and Isa into this, it was a sentence that spoke rhythm, reflection, and connection. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Where does the clock reside today? And have you submitted it to the Copenhagen Museum for display at any point in time?
So the clock is in the ownership of Sina and Isa's company, and we are reworking it for selling, because I didn't touch on this at all, but the way that the porcelain sphere is connected is actually via bayonet thing. So you take it over, there are 4 holes modeled into the porcelain, you put it over 4 pegs and you turn it half around. It's scary to do because the porcelain is like this. So to make it more practical, if it goes out somewhere, we've changed the way it's mounted. We are going to do a bit of refinishing because it's been taken up and moved around a lot of times, so it needs a bit of finish. And the very small time, the very strict time frame we had for it really didn't relay perfect finishing. So that's one of the things we're working on. And there's been interest from 4 different museums and 3 collectors. So it really shows me that there's potential for this thing. But it was not only me and Isabel and Signe that worked on it. We also had help from Lynn Rosenbeck, a gold and silversmith machinist, a stone cutting company who actually carved out the stone base. So there's all these people involved and all these costs. So the price is kind of steep, but it's not off compared to the amount of work. It's very fairly priced, and compared to other pieces of art in that size, it's a totally normal price. But that also means that the amount of people who are looking to buy it, it's a select few group.
I've got 2 questions. The simple one is, what was the generative design program that you used, since there are several on the market? What?
Autodesk Fusion.
Autodesk. Okay.
It's a fully CAD and CAM software, and that's why I use it. I was originally trained on Autodesk Inventor, but Autodesk Inventor costs the same per month as Fusion costs per year. So at the start, Fusion was very horrible to use, but now it's actually a quite powerful software, and I use it exclusively for all my computer work.
Okay. The second question, since at the start you said that it was difficult to regulate.
Yeah.
Did you ever consider putting some type of a secondary dial inside of it just to help you?
You are much smarter than me. No, what I ended up doing was like a beat amplifier and a beat counter. But the thing is, it takes a long time for a pendulum to settle, so you had to set it up and leave it for a long time, and then do an adjustment, set it up, leave it for a long time. It's a slow process.
I had a question about the constant force spring, that mechanism. I think you referred to it as the keeper spring, that the constant force spring is wound around.
Yeah, the keeper
correct?
barrel.
Keeper barrel. So is the spring in that barrel a typical profile that you would find in a spring?
It's just round. It just needs to be round.
Got it.
I made this cutout to try and get something to stop it before you wound it off the barrel too much.
Right.
It's probably there's probably some engineer somewhere who says, "Oh, it's not supported fully around," and something like that. Maybe, I don't know, but it works in this sense, and now it's been in constant function for 4 years now, and it shows almost no signs of anything. It's only lubricated 3 places: on the pallets and on the sliding surfaces and on the click. And we wind it, and it keeps going.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Oi.
Is there any kind of indication inside the clock when you go to set it? You got to put it at full moon or new moon or something, right, and then advance it. How do you do that without having the porcelain on, be able to see exactly what the phase of the moon is and everything?
Yeah, so that is how we've been setting it, waiting for a definitive thing, and halfway through is actually the easiest because you just stand in front and you. But that's one of the things we're improving. For it to be practical, we're doing a little scale on the center of the shadow caster with the synodic period on it.
So you did enter this in some kind of a competition. How did you do in the competition?
So it's not a competition, it's just an exhibition. Because if it was a competition, of course we would have won.
I'm curious, are you guys working on another piece?
We have so many ideas for things, but one thing we told ourselves when we were finished with this, we were ecstatic. We've been working. My summer that year, that was 90 to 100-hour work weeks for months, like 3 months of that. I was burned out, and I had the thing, I think we talked about it the last time, at 2, 3 in the morning, you get overwhelmed with this sense of what is going on. It's almost like you can't breathe something, and you just slump back in your chair, and you go home and you sleep, and you wake up early the next morning, and you have energy to go again. And that's because it's not fueled, it's fueled by passion. So that overrides some of the things, and it probably wears on your health tremendously. But yeah.
I'm sure if you financed the next one, he'd get to it a lot sooner.
Yeah. So the thing is, when we were finished, we were elated because of actually having all this effort come into something that actually existed, and that the reception was very good. But we said to ourselves, we're never doing this again without any funding, because we had 0 funding. And it cost me maybe 6 months of full-time work. And then we had to buy all the materials, and especially all the things with the porcelain and the steel ribbon and cutting this base. We ended up getting the base donated by the company who cut it, but it was immensely expensive in materials, and I used up so much money in cutter inserts. I only buy the best Swiss ones, and they're crazy expensive. Yeah, so our idea was never without any funding, but we have so many ideas, and at some point the moon will align again with some planets, and we can keep going. Thank you.
Why doesn't it have a dial? What subscription level for Fusion are you using? Are you using just a base?
No, I have some very old one, and they're really trying to get me to one of the newer tiers, because I have something called Legacy subscription. I've been paying for it for so long, and every time I renew it, because I know the price is going to go up if I do it. So what I mainly use for this, the basic would work. I don't know if they removed generative design into.
That's what I'm asking about. Yeah.
They probably moved it to an extension.
Yep.
But generative design, I think you can also do it with tokens, so you can just buy some tokens for money and use it. But the Fusion I'm using now, I have the base Fusion, I have the manufacturing extension, and I have the managing extension, because on my watches I have a lot of parts to manage when I have this assembly. So I use the managing extension to do complicated bills of materials, generate part numbers, stuff like that. And then you can use Fusion satisfactorily without the manufacturing extension. You can do 3-axis programming, no problem. But one thing you really want to do if you're doing very complex parts is to snip off parts of the toolpath just graphically, and that's in the extension. So that's mainly why I have it.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I was asking.
Does that Autodesk Fusion include that iterative topology you used?
When I did it 4 years ago, it did, but now it might be on an extension you have to add. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, but pricing in Autodesk products, it's all over the place, and they really tried to take advantage at some point, and they got a bit of pushback, and I think it leveled out a little bit, but it changes so much, I can't even keep up with it. I just keep my legacy subscription and keep on rolling.
You should do a horological Patreon. Take up donations for the extension. Anyone else?
Oh.
I presume the light bulb was battery powered. What kind of life do you get on that?
It wasn't actually, because what we did was the people that carved the stone, we had them in the bottom carve out a hole. We put an LED driver for doing ceiling lights. Then we had a channel milled in the bottom, so it actually has normal power from a power plug from the back in, and then through this hoop, stainless steel hoop, is actually hollow. So we put the wires through there, and it's the sphere on top is mounted with 3 bolts, and one of them is actually hollow. So we pulled the wires through there.
Okay.
So it'll run on normal power.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're next. What do we got, about 15, 20 minutes till we're back? Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it's going to be good.
there something wrong with the internet? Or do you need the internet? Oh. Working, Mike? What? Just back a little bit. Step. Do you want to step back a titch? No, I'm saying, like, don't. Yeah, there. Yeah. I'm not in anybody's. You can do that. Yeah. Yeah. Go on. Yeah. Anything technical, and I'll mess it up. So Mike's better off to take it. I shouldn't have eaten this mental.
I should have got something for my throat.
There's mints on the table.
Bit of mint or
No, they are. See them over there? They're big whole mints.
I don't really go.
No, seriously.
Suck out. Cracked it out for a long time, except for.
I would still use putty.
Would I put putty under this, or?
I would make it a ring.
Yeah.
I liked what you had up. I thought it was like, ooh, yeah. No.
Uh-oh.
We're going to start anyway.
As I said, it's not as if I could run away. You could just like throw the mic at me, you know. I wasn't going to get far. I wouldn't even make it to the door.
All right, it's time to get started. So,
Again. Here's the girl.
Yeah. So, Alison and Mike Moriarty are up again, and you see a good number. I shouldn't say a lot, but a good number of enamel dials on watches today. I know Jordan's displaying some really nice ones out there, just quite nice. But virtually all of them are predominantly opaque and multiple colors on the same one as like you do it. There's nothing like you do out there, at least that I've seen. If they are, they should get on Instagram. But I watched Alison's work for a period of time and just watching it improve, get better, etc. Thought it was really good. So I engaged her, trolled, is that the word?
Stalked.
Stalked her on Instagram and engaged her in conversation. And it's at that point I thought she's an extremely good candidate to come here to communicate, especially to younger, aspiring people that want to break out, but not just the younger people. I don't want to say you were quite old when you got started, but for getting started in watches.
Well, I started in watches at 17 and started
But to your
enameling
own
at
company.
44.
Yeah.
And now I'm 50.
And thing that I see is you got your fundamental skills, exercised them for a lot of years, and then broke out.
Yeah.
And with the encouragement that came from Mike and all that, it's just a beautiful story.
Thank you.
And a story that I'm glad you told yesterday, and I'm eager to see the technical side of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
enough of me.
How the watch came about.
Absolutely perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. So it's us again, the introduction. So yes, the struggles and successes, which I think we put that in as an after note of creating a watch, but it was, as we talked yesterday about a brand that didn't come about first. It all stemmed from a very, very innocuous conversation of two middle-aged Irish people sitting on a Friday evening watching the telly. And Mike was looking on his phone, and I was the other side of the room, and he said, aren't enamel watches, like he said, dials, like fabulous? And I didn't really pass any heed, and I was like, yeah. And he said, you don't really see many of, like them in everyday sort of wearable, watches. He said, well, you do, but they're expensive. And I was like, yeah. And he said, I said, why? I said, why are you talking about this? And he goes, I'd really, really love an enamel dial watch. So at that point, I sort of said to him, okay, sort of come back a bit to reality here. I said, you're either going to have to dig deep, where digging deep is just you're going to meet dirt because there was nothing there, or I'm going to just buy a trench watch on eBay, restore it, and you can have your enamel dial watch. But I don't think a 22 mil trench watch is really going to, go on Mike's wrist. So, and then I sort of laughed at him actually, and he said to me, he goes, do you know, he said, just had an idea. He goes, well, why can't you just make one? And there was like, I don't get speechless too often, but I was like, okay, Mike, look, I'm going to lay it out for you. I said, okay, I'm a horologist. I repair and restore watches. I said, yes, enamel dials go with watches. But I said, enamel dial making is a completely different craft, which I really actually know nothing about. And I said, the other end of it is, as far as I know from talking with people when I was younger in the business, you can't just make one. I said, I think the materials to do so are just vast, and I said, it's just not going to happen. So he picked at me for about another couple of weeks, and he goes, well, will you just maybe look into it? So the next thing then is I said, right, fine. I gave in and I went looking for books, as everybody does. So all I found, and I just put up a couple of pictures of research. My research led me only to enameling in regards to jewelry. There is no book, and I've actually been asked, well, why don't I sort of fix that? There's no book that says how to make an enamel watch dial from start to finish, chapter 1. And there isn't. So yeah, something for the future, but not at the moment. So that's really as far as I got. And I'll be honest and say I am a procrastinator, and I think David found that from probably our conversations. Mike knows it all too well after nearly 30 years. And he just sort of kept niggling at me. And
weeks later.
Literally a couple of weeks later, kids had gone to school, Mike was out of the house, there was like knocking on the front door, and there was this FedEx guy outside with a container. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, Moriarty's? And I'm like, yeah. And because we're the only Moriarty's and we live in the middle of nowhere. And he goes, I have a delivery. And I was like, oh, okay. I thought Mike had ordered something. I was like, well, you're going to have to bring that in. So we just planted it in the hall. And so I thought I got curious, and I opened up the box, and it was a kiln. And then he comes home, and I had a few expletives, and he was like, yeah, he goes, it's time to get practical. He said, you're done procrastinating. He goes, just get practical.
Do it.
You know, and yeah, just do it. And then he said the probably words that have followed me through the flames, what's the worst that can happen? So the kiln, and then a steel bench turned up about a couple of days later. Mike had cleared out. We had what we call the third floor. It's like attic, but it was fully done, and like
the workshop was there.
It was
so
the
half
workshop
of
there.
it's
So
changed around,
yeah, my workshop was already cleared out. So we just reconfigured, and this big fireproof metal bench that took 3 grown men to get up a tiny stairs into this space. It was just comical. I should have taken pictures. Mm-hmm. And this lone kiln was sitting on this huge bench. And then he came home the next day from work with a fire extinguisher. So he had super faith. So then it went on to equipment. So from the books, I had seen pretty much from pictures, because there's very little lists of equipment. And I had seen, obviously, there was your kiln, your fire extinguisher, your fireproof bench. I just got a porcelain tile that I sit in front of the kiln, and metal racks, gloves, obviously a face mask. I said, okay, I'm not going to go mad, and I'm going to, start with the basics. White, black, blue enamel, this stuff called counter enamel, 3 sieves. I was like really going all out there. 1/2 mil copper, I bought 1 sheet. And we had quite a rudimentary punch, an enormous hammer, which Mike made very good use of, silver wire and diamond sandpaper, which I'll get back to, and a tub of pickle granules, which are, I'm sure everybody probably knows pickle. These ones were citric acid, they can be nitric acid, and they just dissolve in tepid water. It's just for cleaning your substrate. So yeah, that was just, I was like, okay, I've got all the gear and I'm going. I was so naive. So there was all of that and so much more. Oh, I also got a porcelain mortar and pestle. And we had our own well, a filtered water straight out of the ground. So like, as far as I was concerned, that was like really the best stuff you can have. When it came down to it, I'll just get to will I get to the equipment that I actually needed? Or will I'll get to that after. We'll just go to, so the first thing I did was I had shears and I had all these, they were later colors, but that blue was one of the first blues. It was cobalt blue. We were up in the workshop and Mike cut them out, and I didn't put a picture up, I should have, and it's on my Instagram. If anybody scrolls back down a couple of years, and they'll see me there, and I've at my little jeweler's bit of wood, and I'm sanding, and I'm oh so happy, you know. And yeah. So yeah, I did these. I did what it said in the books, and I had watched a few YouTube videos. Again, it was just all with regards to jewelry, and they were saying like 800, if you fire them at 800 degrees for X amount of minutes, I think that equates to about 1550 Fahrenheit. And so I was doing this, and I had like this book, and I was writing, oh, the drop and the temperature and what this color turned at, and these, okay, the squares weren't flat because it's very hard to get a square enamel piece flat, and it said this in the books, don't mind about that, and there was little curves, but otherwise I was getting amazing glosses, and they were just fantastic. So I just thought I was cruising with regards the start of this enameling. So the logical next step then was, since I thought that I was like just best thing since sliced bread, well, I'll make them round, because obviously my dials were going to be round. So I went and I got more colors, because, you know, as you do. So I found, which I learned later on, that not all enamel is dial enamel. Actually, most enamel that you get is not dial quality enamel. It all has to be cleaned painfully, slowly, with huge amount of care, but I hadn't a care in the world at this stage, and I didn't even know about that.
These were coming out really vibrant colours, really clean, and there was a reason for it. They were very thick.
Yeah, but we won't get to that yet. So they were turning out great, and I thought, as I said, it was oh so easy. Yeah, but so there was the big, when we got to this stage, they were circular. They were the size that the dial I wanted for the watch. Mike had found the case maker. He was like, Alison, give me a depth measurement, because this guy's waiting. He's going to do the 20. If you delay, he's just going to leave it. So I'm a watchmaker. 1 millimeter in watch world is miles. So I was going, okay, a standard dial, 0.4, 1 millimeter, that's huge. Yeah, I said, Mike, make the dial a millimeter thick. I said, it's going to be massive. So that was my first oops. I never measured the thickness of any of these testers. I measured the diameter. I never and it sounds really, really stupid when I look at it now, but I was just elated. I was on an enameling high.
These are fantastic. This is easy.
Yeah,
I have no problem doing this. Look at these.
I was like, Mike, I said, this is just, compared to reality, this is so easy. Yeah, I never measured the thickness with the micrometer. All of these testers are between 1.3 and 1.5 millimeters. So, we go on. Making enamel dial, the problems encountered. Well, first of all, mine had to be 1 millimeter, including the counter enamel, including the substrate, which was 0.5 millimeter. So, yeah. Dial feet. I spent months fighting with dial feet, trying all different ways. I started off with like 1.5 mil silver, and I, turned them down in the lathe until they had like this super thin end, and I thought that I'd make that flush with the dial, and like through a hole that was in it, and it just, everything I tried. Dial feet were really a disaster.
You were trying to. We were looking online for different ways of trying to find to do it. Seen videos where they drilled it and punched them in, but the problem is you were getting shading on the enamel.
Yeah, shading them because my enamel, because I had snookered myself straight out of the gate. My enamel was so thin, and these enamels were unleaded, so any air that was caught, and I had to use copper because I needed the extra rigidity. It completely ruled out me using fine silver, which is what I wanted. So any air that was getting caught, at this time I was sifting. Any air that was getting caught underneath, of course, that was oxidizing, and then the enamel being unleaded, which I learned way after all of this, it just can't absorb that oxidization. So paler colors that I had wanted to do, like this color, I was getting gray shading when I got to the millimeter, and it'd fire, and I'd end up with gray shading here, and the rest was great, or I'd end up with gray around here. I did try with silver, and again, naivety, I didn't know about reactions of certain enamel colors with silver, and I also didn't know about a thing called putting a layer of transparent enamel, but even if I did know about it at that time, I didn't have even 0.1 of a millimeter, which is about a layer of sifted fine enamel. It's 80 mesh enamel. I didn't even have that 1 millimeter to give.
0.1.
Yeah, sorry, 0.1 of a millimeter. I didn't have it spare. So, yeah, the unevenness, that's what we were getting about the shading. The other thing, when I went, obviously, all the testers I did had no center holes. So when I went to fire dials with center holes, on their final fire, and I'll tell you how I got around that, but I was getting slumping, and really like never rising, always slumping. And no matter how much you try and rectify that, you can only fire so many times. I know companies say, oh, we fire 9 times, or maybe they do, but there's only so much stress you can put, A, the substrate, and B, the glass, the enamel, because it's glass, and all that I don't make the powder, it's alchemy, that's another thing. But you can only put it under so much stress. And I had to go back and, sorry, I'm actually running forward. So we had the reactions with certain colors between the silver, and that's where we come with burning. I found out then that because I wanted to, first ones were the pinks, and Alina knows about the pink, and I went through kilos of pink. I had PTSD after pink.
You started to get ways of getting around the dial feet. So she tried all the different ways, firing, putting dial feet on afterwards, didn't work, it burned the enamel. Eventually it settled on putting the dial brazing the dial feet on prior, and basically praying that they wouldn't fall off.
I'll tell you how I sort of got around. It was actually only before only the finished one that I custom sort of jigged stuff up, which you end up doing to suit yourself. So the burning, the reactions, any enamel with that is unleaded, that is gold bearing. So it's all some oranges, some yellows, all your family of pinks, reds, purples, and all those shades in between. They'll react with silver. Obviously gold is the wonder metal along with platinum, but like you start doing your dials on gold, and that's a whole other level of enameling and a whole other level of cost. So the first pink I fired, I took it out, and all the edge was like a burnt caramel color, and I didn't know what I'd done wrong. And it wasn't until months later that I'd learned about reactions. So I've learned an awful lot about the reaction of enamel between leaded and unleaded enamels and their reactions with metals, the coefficient of the different types of enamel glass, because you get different coefficients. So you have some that you can put together and some that you can't. Most of mine are what they call coefficient 90. I have some coefficient 96s. They play nice with 90s, but not with ones that are above that. And I do have those lovely blues that were in the previous one. They're 104s. I've never used them since because I can't mix them with anything other than themselves. So this was all a massive learning curve. This is really, pushed into so little, but this happened over
months and months,
going into years.
It was kind of solve one problem and get on to the next.
And found another, yeah.
And it was an organic process to get from having a substrate to be flat, having the dial feed that will stay on, then tackle the slumping, tackle the reactions and the burning.
Okay, so
temperatures.
the burning and the reactions, obviously, I have left to a side, and I'll talk about that after. But so at the end of the struggles, I was at home on my own one day. I like the house to be empty when I work, and I can't say why I did this. And I think probably it was because I was self-taught. I had nobody to say to me, no, Alison, you can't actually do that. And I just, at this stage, I had bought so many different colors and had failures in all of them, and these were on their own as individual colors. So it had started with the blue that Mike has, and so I had loads of cobalt blue. I bought nearly 1 kilo of the stuff. So I had these mason jars, little Kilner jars, and I can't tell you measurements, but so I got like a spoon of the cobalt and I put that in, and I had about 7 other shades of blue in the same coefficient, and I was like a bit, and then I was like, so I threw in a bit of red, and that, and I put in like, it ended up about 15 plus colors that I put in, and I prepped my substrate. I put the feed on because I learned that now I do every tester for a color as if it was going to be a dial. So I do all my cutting. I since have got a hydraulic press and a much better cutter, so Mike isn't up there beating a hammer. So I cut them all. I like to do them in a large quantity so that they're there, so when a mistake is made, that goes into the bucket of shame. And I just can take another one, put it through the pickle, clean it all off, and continue on. So I cleaned it all and had it all prepped, and I had this little amount of mixed enamel, and I did it away, and Mike came home that evening, and it actually was slightly after that, wasn't it? Yeah, sorry. So is it the next one? So yeah, so we said about, sorry, I should have put up this one. So yes, the opaque enamels and the substrate problems that I had.
This goes on to the first one, opaque enamels.
Yeah, I probably jumped on you.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
Sorry, I didn't know about this one. So yeah, so the opaque enamels. So yeah, so this is what I do. So I prep every dial, every piece now as if it's going to be a dial. So putting it out in my cutter. I also hand dress it, sanding, pickling, then washing off with deionized water, then the dial feet completely by hand, just with a third arm. It's very rudimentary. Then pickling again, because mine is a watch workshop. You don't have running water in a horology workshop, so I have basins and good old toothbrush and like clean them off, pickling again, and then rinsing, and then we get to. Sorry, I'm after skipping all this.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back there.
Yeah. So then the.
Opaque enamels. No, that's opaque enamels.
Yeah. So the opaque enamels. And
The different
yes,
types.
so the enamel, sorry, I jumped ahead, I was getting too excited. So enamel, people might know this, but just sort of clarify, enamel comes in different forms. So obviously I was able to, but you can put the lump, which is the darker green, that will take a lot of just malleting to get it down to the next, which they just call frit, and then you have different grades of frit down to fine frit, which is the nice turquoise at the bottom, down to, you'll see that big box of what I get most of my enamels in the form of is powder. But again, as I said, enamel isn't all dial enamel. It's none of it is. It all has to be cleaned, whether it comes to you. It is actually cleaner, getting it in sheet or lump form than actually getting it in powder form. But for me, physically and that, it just can be a little bit easier for me just to clean out the powder form. So sorry, I was jumping ahead. So after that, we have the applications. So in my workshop I do two, and I do sifting. On this one I sifted in red just so it would come up better on the pictures, and then the second application that I learned, and I actually had to learn it the hard way, and it wasn't until late 2023 that I actually found out what I was doing wrong with the wet packing method. So up until that, I was sticking with the sifting method. So we can just go then to the next one, the firing a dial from,
Sifting method.
Yeah, so, with the dry sifting. So the biggest thing is pay attention. You can see on that the black shading on either side. So even though I'm pretty practiced and I can get it pretty even, that's just the first layer. So I don't really worry about that too much now. I don't. At the start I did. So every layer is about 0.1, 0.12, and I also learned by the hard way, you don't sand between layers at all. So the biggest thing from the get-go is pay attention. Pay attention to the cleanliness of your substrate. It has to be spotless. Hold it on the outside, as Dennis was saying. Finger grease is your enemy for everything. The other thing that all of the enameling jewelry books were all saying, fire at over 800 degrees. You hear this term thrown around a lot of grand fou, and everybody says, oh yes, we fire it over 800 degrees. I'll say who told me in the end, but I've found since that my enamels hit and turn, and I literally watched through the port. I watched the grains melting, and they all hit in between 770 and 790 Celsius. And I know people say that, oh yeah, that we fire them for 5 minutes. It's about 50 seconds, and it turns. The other thing that you can see on this actually, the trivet under the dial, the way it's just the mesh. Where we were having the foot loss, they were just trivets bought from, again, a jewelry supplier, and they're the typical 3-pronged trivet, and for some reason the heat was transferring and I was losing not 1 but 2 feet nearly every time. So my feet underneath there are aligned this way, and the mesh is the same mesh that it's fired on, and I don't know why, but there's the tiny little bit, so there's very little of that mesh touching, and so I think it's just less heat transfer underneath. And I actually haven't had foot loss, unless it's been my own error of cutting them too short after. I haven't had foot loss by just making your own to suit your own at all. Then another thing that I learned from an enameler, I said way into this process, was I was cooling my pieces too fast. So we found these very, very
expensive.
Very, yeah. I know the watchmakers in the room, you know, you see those beautiful antique glass bell jars for benches, yeah, and you always want them, but they're just so expensive. So Mike was doing
local grocery store
shopping, and he passed.
They had these on sale. They were lovely little things for putting biscuits under.
And they were glass.
For $10. I was going, oh, they work.
He came home with 5 of them. So I have 3 for my watch bench and 2 for beside the kiln. And they take the heat. Also, I use, you'll see under the first layer fired, it's basically just a clay honeycomb. You can get those from jewel ones. I keep one permanently on top of the kiln. I heat my kiln for 2 hours before I ever use it. I was told that from another jewelry artist, and I've stuck to that, and it has stood to me. And I leave that jar and that plate, that clay heat, and they stay up there warm. So my big thing, I was cooling them too fast, and I was getting cracking, because obviously your substrate is going to cool at a different temperature than your glass is going to cool. It makes sense now, but at the time, it just wasn't computing. Yeah. So now they come straight out, and they sit up and they go underneath that jar for probably about 20-25 minutes. Then I put them onto another wire rack. They're still hot at this stage. They're hot to touch. You're not going to get burnt, but they're hot. Put them on another rack under another jar, and I leave them fully cool. So I've learned not to touch, and it's like step away and go slow. I was trying to do things too fast. So you continue then with the next layer and the next layer. So depending on your dial thickness, you want to go about at least 0.25, 0.3 above, and then you sand down.
That's the next part.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So this was a dial. It's a once-off. Now the last picture is before it was fully done. We saw the watch from yesterday on the orange strap. The Aegean, you'll also see it on my Instagram. It was done purposefully, and I actually got these even ripples. It was crazy. So
wet pack method.
Yeah, so this is wet packing. I didn't master wet packing until after we had gone to Switzerland, for Mike was doing the crash course in the dial pad printing, and we were very, very lucky and humbled.
We had been to Waterford, and we had met Rune and some other people, and a very good gentleman, Albert, from Zeitwinkel. We were chatting, and he said, did we ever chat to the lady in Neuchâtel, the anomalous? So me being me,
yeah, and I was
I
like,
get
no.
on and I say, get on the computer and I say, who's this lady? So I found Vanessa Lecce, and she was just after going on Instagram. And I just liked a couple of pieces, and I did a comment on something that was there, and I showed Alison that was very apt. And she came back and said, thank you very much for liking my page, and are you interested in this? She's very much into education on enameling. And I told her my wife is learning enameling, and cheekily said we'd be over in 3 weeks in Neuchâtel. And she said, well, if you're over, let me know, and if I'm free, I'll meet you. So I didn't tell Alison this.
Again.
So
yeah, there's a real running theme with Mike and not telling me stuff. He tells me stuff at the last minute, so that I
on
just
the Saturday, we were driving to Dublin, and so I got on the computer and just went, we're over from Sunday to Wednesday. And she replied, and she said, I'm free Monday afternoon. So I got her on the plane and said, oh, by the way, we're meeting Vanessa Lecce on Monday evening. I mean, there was a crowd of people. She couldn't kill me. Like.
Yeah, so we were 37,000 feet up, and yeah, I couldn't open the door and throw them out. So we met Vanessa. That was November 23, and Vanessa is a native of Italy, but she's been living in Switzerland for a long time. She is a most supremely gifted. She started out as a jeweler, and she went into enameling, and you look her up, look her work, you'll probably know it. It's just unbelievable.
Who did she set up the workshop for? It was yeah.
So anyway, so we were in Vanessa's workshop. Of course, I was a bit like a deer in headlights, and I didn't really know what to say. So between Vanessa was learning English, and my French is non-existent, and of course we have the great thing called Google Translate. So between Italian, French, and Google Translate, we had about a 4.5-hour conversation. So I was telling Vanessa what I was doing, and she looked up my Instagram thing, and she goes, and who's helping you? And I'm like, nobody. I actually had approached one enamelist, and I can't even remember his name now, and I told Vanessa this story. I said, I did approach one person about a year before I met Vanessa, and it was the time where stuff, I just couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. And I didn't want his secret recipe. I was just like, can you give me any tips? And he replied to me a week or two later and said, well, hey, yeah, nice to ask, but when I was learning, I had no one to ask either. So best of luck.
I had to suffer, so you have to suffer too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I told Vanessa this, and she was just like, she goes, her philosophy was that she, over the last 30 years, has learned all of this, that she's like, why am I going to covet that? Why am I going to keep it to myself? I want to give back. So we were going through what I was doing. And there was just the tiny things about the firing, the 770 degrees, the watching, the not cooling too fast, the leaving it on top of the kiln. And then we got to, she said, are you wet packing? And I'm like, well, I've tried. And she goes, well, what are you grinding your enamel with? Because even when you get powdered enamel, to do wet packing, you have to grind more. So I was like, well, the same as that's in all the books. I said the mortar and pestle. And she was like, yeah, but what type? And I was like, and I showed her a picture, and she was like, no. And she went down the end of the workshop. She picked up the biggest agate mortar I have ever seen. And she goes, agate, you have to have agate. It's harder than glass and it will not leave any residue. I could not understand why, when I was using clean water, the deionized water that I stumbled on, why I was getting all these particulates. It was coming off the porcelain and contaminating everything I was doing. So we came back from Switzerland, and one thing Vanessa said to me when I was there, I said to her, first of all, I said to her, when I finally do a dial, and maybe when I get to be an enamelist, and I'll send you a picture of the dial. And she goes, oh, do send me a picture, she said. But she said, Alison, she said, you're already an enamelist. So I thought that was really nice of her.
The opaque enamel, the question on
Oh,
opaque.
yes. Then the other thing she asked me, because she was looking at my pictures, she goes, I've got one question for you. She said, why have you stuck with opaque and haven't done any transparent? And I pretty much thought the answer was obvious, and I was like, well, the likes of you. And I said, you know, all the dials that I had seen in all the private museums when I was younger, and all the public museums, and you know, like all these super complicated dials, they're all transparent. So I said to her that well, I wanted to just start with baby steps, and I said I'd start with opaque. And she put her head in her hands and she said, no, opaque is so much harder. That's why we don't use it.
And the pink? The pink?
Oh, yeah.
And she said the pink was the most difficult of them all.
And she said the pink, and I said, she goes, do you have to make that pink? I said, yes. I said, it's for a client that is with me from the start. She goes, okay, best of luck. It's the hardest one to do. So she said, when one's done, send me the picture. But she goes, you're already in enamel. So I came back renewed. Oh, one other thing she gave me, she said, what paintbrushes are you using? And I'm like, well, I stopped, but I said paintbrushes. And she said, no, sable brushes. So they are expensive in the art shops, and especially you get the tiny ones. And what's even worse is you get them and you end up plucking them then with your tweezers and snipping them, and then you end up with your favorite brush, but you've absolutely ruined a brush that you've spent about 60 quid on. So, but it's made perfect for you. But anyway, my daughter is an artist and she's like, but yeah, she takes all the brushes I haven't used. So I came back super renewed, and first thing I did was I got an agate mortar and pestle, and I went grinding like crazy, because this turquoise was also for a client who is also a client of Mike's and has become a friend, and he was also being so patient, and at this stage it was going into years that they were waiting. So the wet packing, you're grinding. As you're grinding, it's going to settle and you're going to get like a cloudy top on it. And you're going to have to pour that off, and then you're going to have to put in. Now, once the enamel is wet, you can take off your face mask. It's okay. So then you're going to have to more water, more grinding, more washing, more water, and that goes on until you get what you hope is spotlessly clean. And then again, you have to prep the substrate, and it has to be absolutely, I really can't stress enough, spotless, spotless, spotless. And your work area. Now, because my workshop is both horology and enameling, when I enamel, it is also on my horology bench. Everybody might take a big gasp at that, but it's a seat standing bench, so I can put it down low. Everything horological is put away. It's a lot to do, so you're stripping one workshop, scrubbing it to work on another. That's why I only do one dial at a time, one piece at a time. So then I use a microscope, and again, I learned the hard way that you have to apply it very, very thinly, but you also have to cover all of it at the same time. But it's wet, so it can be hard to see, because it can make you think that it's covered, and it mightn't be. So you apply it by the brush. Another thing Vanessa gave me was that it might sound funny, but you go to this, it can often take me about 45 minutes to an hour or more to cover my dial, because it's quite big and it's very, very slow. I've found that the slower I go, the better it is. You then take that dial, you put it on top of the kiln under the clean bell jar, and you let it dry. I know it sounds weird, but yeah, wet packing has to be dried. And then it stays up there for about half an hour till it's fully dry, and then it fires. When that turquoise came out, it comes out this really pale color, and I was absolutely petrified. I was like, oh no, what did I do? But no, as it cooled, it darkened. And basically, you repeat. You don't sand. Now, the second layer with wet packing is difficult because my microscope has the LED light rings, and you do need the light, even though I have extra lights from different sides, but they tend to shine from the glass. So you're trying to cover it while you have some parts of it shining. So what I have found with the second layer, I put the dial into a movement holder so I can slightly move it, and so I can counteract that glare that I get. And then you basically rinse, repeat, and you go the same with that. And so that's my version of wet packing.
Next slide.
Yeah, so then we get to, I sand everything by hand. At the start, again, I was doing things too fast, and my sandpaper was too rough, even though it was pretty smooth. So I use sandpaper that's probably it's diamond paper. I cut it to fit, as you can see, my really technical stick. But Mike had got these holders for me, and I literally, it takes me, you have to sand them wet, but again, I don't have a sink. So I've a lot of kitchen paper. I have my little nozzle with the spotless clean water, and as I sand, and you can see the enamel detritus sort of building up, so it's over the basin and just cleaned off. I still don't touch it, bring it back, wet it all again, and just keep going again. A dial can take me about over 12 hours to sand it down to the millimeter.
Just a note on this, you can do this with a lap machine, but it gives
Mike did get a lapping machine for me, and I just personally, I think as well it was maybe to do with the thinness of my dials, but for me it didn't work, and I didn't really realize it at the time.
You didn't like the finish on it?
I didn't like the finish, no, and so I just stuck with slow and steady, the tortoise route. and hand sanding. Just sanding, you'll see the water going there. The orange actually shows up great when you're sanding it. The black is quite good. Some of the paler colors you have to really watch, because you can't let that dirty enamel build up, and you know, you have to like wash it off, but you have to wash it off with that spotless deionized water, not tap water, and then you have to cover it again, and you have to sand it again. So, but you have to make sure, like, it's fine. I know that these diamond pads, they do come with the rubber backing. You can buy them that way, but I would recommend, because you can do them with that, but you're not going to see it, but you are going to get a curve because of that give. So you just have to go really, really slow. You do need something that isn't heavy. And I just found that the wood that you get, like, you know, for emery board paper, I just found that there's enough stability and rigidity, but it's not hard, but I get flatness. So, yeah.
And then it's the pressure you're putting on it.
It is,
well.
yeah, and it's just something that I had to learn by feel. I think horology probably has stood to me on that end of things. I'm very tactile, especially when it comes to the grinding. When you're grinding your enamel, it's not really, you can see the particles that have to be washed off coming to the surface, but you're feeling it and you're hearing it. You know, and you can nearly, I can nearly close my eyes now and grind, and I'll know when I've gotten to what I want if I've worked that color before. If it's a new color, they all have their own personality, so they all work differently. So this is a green that I did as a custom for a client. He liked my Hibernia, but the Hibernia has yellow and there's white, and there's actually a couple of shades of blue in it, along with a myriad of greens. And he said to me, Alison, he says, no disrespect, he goes, I love the Hibernia, but is there any chance, he said, you could maybe try and come up with something that just was green, but your signature mixes. So I said, what I say to all my clients, leave it with me, you know. So I go up and I literally, my drawer of green is just from like this pale to the darkest, and it just, the drawer's endless. So I literally have like little 25-gram pots. They're maybe an ounce. No, is that an ounce? Is it? It's half an ounce. I'm not too sure. And I have my tiny little spoons, and it's like a little bit. So in that one there is everything from a pale mint through to one that's just called green, through to jade, and then quite a dark green. So these are the same dial. On the right, my left, that's it, fully sanded, flat, by hand. That was about 14 hours. As you can tell by me, I can't do that in one go. So I would get to the stage and I know I can leave it, wash it off, I dry it with my air compressor, and I put it under the clean glass bell jar, and I crawl up the stairs the next morning and I start on it again. I didn't know, so the one then, here is it after it came out of the kiln and was cooled.
I'll stress here, this is over years.
Yeah, this was...
That's the first time she did that dial, and it was done in one go.
One go, yeah.
Okay.
I was 18, 19, 22. I was, that was only this year, so I was, yeah, 5 years. And I can get them now. Either, I was saying this to a couple of guys that I was chatting with, I can get them on the one go, but I'm probably not that sort of, you know, sort of big headed to go, yeah, I get them all on the first go. I call these my sort of, you know, lucky hits, and sometimes, but I'm pretty much getting them now within 4, and that would be the maximum. And that's once it's a color I've done. If it's a new color, I have to learn it, because every color has, as I said, fires differently. And I just say they have their own personalities. So what number? So these were the first 2 dials that I actually finished. The blue is the one that's in Mike's watch. There's, as I said, there's about 14, 15 different colors in that. Why I ended up mixing opaques, A, it was out of curiosity. B, for some reason, and I don't know, it's the enamel gods, just, I don't know, I'll just put it down to them.
I think you were born on the 31st of October.
I was born on the 31st of October. I am. I'm a Halloween baby. So Mike's like, yeah, it's a bit of witchery as well. So I don't know, just a tiny little bit before I finish up. The thing with opaque enamel is, opaque enamel, which I learned the hard way, it doesn't like to mix. It doesn't like to play together. And if you look at any of these dials under a microscope, even a good like 15 plus X loop, you will actually see the grains, and they are physically wanting to separate. So I just hit on something that, A, it stabilized that they were not cracking, and they were staying and firing at the millimeter, and I was getting the flatness, and I was not getting shading, and the colors just seemed to work. So I struck it lucky on that end, and it was real. It was really, the mixing opaques was born out of curiosity, and it was also born out of, I had nobody to say, as I said, no, you can't do that, because I didn't know you couldn't do it, and I just did it.
The 2 dials, the blue one is the first one she did, and I was lucky enough to get it. The second one, the green, that went to a NASA scientist who's seen it on Instagram. Alison had a saying all through her life about things. She said it's not rocket science. So I thought it was very, very apt.
It was very apt.
That
went to a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are a couple of the finished pieces. You can see that one that I call Aegean. The top turquoise, it's both of these. It's from different angles. So that is not, that rippling is not in the substrate. I created that with the enamel, and it was the one that you saw wet packed. And I did it in such a way that I had more hills than valleys. And
an undulated surface.
And they all ended up even. That was probably a little bit of luck. And there is in that watch, in that dial, why I call it Aegean is first of all, I don't know if anybody's seen the Aegean Sea, but it is that color, and it doesn't have sand, it has pebbles, and I hate sand, so I love the Aegean. And when you walk out in it, you don't meet sand like till you're up to here, and you can see the pebbles rippling under the color, and that reminded me of that, so that's why I named it that. The blue, then I ended up calling it Midnight Sky, because pretty much we live in the country, and I think I was probably actually influenced by, when I look at my dials now, I was influenced probably subconsciously by where I live, as I always put it, in a field in the middle of nowhere. And the Hibernia, that's that one. And then there's the black. I think some of you have said to me about the black. They are more beautiful in person. They're very hard to photograph. This pink, this is only the second one. As I said, I had to go into therapy after that pink, but it was worth it. We printed that in a specialized blue. We've never done a second one. The Aegean was also done as a once-off. I haven't repeated that yet. I would love to. I don't know if I will ever get it the same, but I'll give it a go. Then I talked yesterday then about what I do with the movement, so I won't sort of rehash that, and the handmade straps. But as we said with us, we started out with what I had a vision of, and I always wanted it to be about the dial, and I actually am probably more shocked than anybody about how they turned out and how vibrant they were, and how it was like it was going to the realize that sort of like, it was a necessity is the mother of invention, and I had clients waiting, and they were very patient, but I had to figure this out, and I found a way to figure it out. I'm going to stick with the opaques. I have moved forward with some of my mixes. I have recently, well, as of like last year, I have found a lady. I've said she's in Canada, but that's all you're getting. And she has old stock leaded enamels, and she's finished up her sort of enameling career. So I've been like slowly like getting them into the country unlabeled. Yeah, I know. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I'm not actually getting them.
I think what Alison's trying to say is a lot of this is perseverance.
Yeah.
You come against a problem, work with it and get over it. Try to find a solution. And I think a lot of the watchmaking side has helped that, because watchmakers, they see a problem and they solve it. And that, going into the enameling, helped immensely. It's a mindset that you have to have, because this is not easy.
In between doing all this, I'll just say, and it's not like, oh, aren't you great? But I want to say it because I want to say it for people who are going through adversity. In between this, I had 2 more spinal reconstructions and 2 pelvic reconstructions, and got out of a wheelchair again twice. So that's why I always say, if I can climb up that stairs into the workshop, I'm good to go. And so that's what I sort of say. If up here is still going, I think you can drag the rest of it along with you, you know?
Yeah, I think it's all heart. And I think a lot of people here, it's the same thing. It's a passion, and there's some fantastic people out there that are doing stuff, and to see it finished is fantastic.
Yeah.
And
So
the support we've got through Instagram has been fantastic.
Yeah.
The support anywhere we've gone, and I'd like to say thank you to everyone. You've made us so welcome here.
The only thing, like with social media and that as well, like we because every piece is done individually, and I never get anything left, or never. The only accumulation of pieces I had was at the International Festival of Time, Waterford, and clients were coming, and there was 3 of those pieces were for clients. 1 was being posted, and 2 were coming to the festival, and then 2 were. Three, we're leaving.
5,
so
4.
I've never, these photos, you have to sort of give them a little bit of grace. They're just ones that were taken by me on my phone at Mike going, put up more pictures. I haven't gotten around to a website. All clients have gotten in touch with me through just seeing something on Instagram.
Was correct there. We actually have got around to our website. There's a gentleman doing it. Just we never have pictures for him to finish
I know, I know, and like I feel so bad because it's going on. We'll get there. But Alina as well was a champion for me, and like, you know, she was actually, you were there from the start. I think you were one of the first people I probably told outside of Mike of what I was doing, and I think I had told a couple of other people. She was all support. A few of them thought I was mad. But everybody that I've met, we've met since, and I'm really glad that I came here, and I am glad that Mike said yes on my behalf. And we're moving forward. We've a new case design in production. My dials are now going to be 1.5 millimeters. Yay! So my color palette will expand. I'm going to be able to crack into all those pale colors that have been sitting up there just waiting to get opened, and I've been looking at them for years. And then of course all the stuff I've been getting from this other lady, I'm just like itching to get at it.
There's colors that Alison has done that she hasn't shown, and they're just spectacular, and it's just because she's fussy. The red was one of them. She would not bring that to Waterford. I put a picture on it on Instagram, and I got a message within 10 minutes they wanted it. So these fantastic colours.
Yeah, so the week before we came here, he was, Alison, the red dial, and I'm like, no. He goes, Alison, put the red dial in the case now. Put it in the movement. He says, we're bringing it. And I'm like, no, Mike, no, it's just not right. So when it goes back home, it's actually going to come out of the case and go back into the box of Mike's swap out dials. Because I'm actually, for the gentleman, for the red, he's going with the new case, and I'm going to do him one on the new heavier. And now I can use fine silver and go into using lots of gold bearing colors, and I'm looking forward to what'll
next stage.
Yeah, more mishaps and misadventures, and and there has been no fires.
That she tells me of.
Earlier in the month, we hit the 1-year anniversary of when we moved out all of our equipment from our old shop.
Yeah.
And I sent a note to all the team saying it's been a year. And the founder, Bill, he sends back a note and he says, and the madness comment reminded me of it.
Yeah.
I think we are all mad. There is a long history of Sufi lore, Shakespeare, and biblical studies of madmen who deliver to their observers a door to revelation.
And mad women.
I like that.
Yes, I like that too. You got to have a little bit of madness.
A lot of madness.
Okay, a lot of madness. Yeah.
I've kind of a big question.
Okay.
So yesterday you were talking, and I haven't stopped thinking about this. You were talking about how you set out to do something that was approachable.
Yes.
And this has been a theme throughout the weekend.
Okay.
All the mistakes, all the equipment, all the time, all the just everything. It seems that you got to a place where you created something, not really with any commercial interest. It was like, could I do this?
Yeah,
but
that's
you
right.
wanted it to be approachable from like a financial perspective.
Yeah.
And that's, kind of subjective, right?
Yes, it is.
Very much.
It is, yeah.
So the question is, now you're saying, okay, now we've got a new case design, we can push things a little bit more, you have more demand.
Only a tiny bit more, because I don't want to go out of that.
So is that, were you able to do that? Is there some secret sauce that through this process you said, okay, I can create a product that I'm proud of, but then also there's some way that you can do it that is commercially viable, that is also approachable, or have you had to kind of push that?
Well, it's definitely
It's the bully over here.
It's definitely not commercially viable. I don't know.
It'll be years and years and years before the amount of financial that has gone into
this has all been
is crazy.
Like self-financed, just slowly over years. But I never sort of had that in my mind.
And it wasn't. It was more important to me to have Alison have something to do, a therapy that would overcome her problems, and it absolutely did. It's been incredible, the difference in the last 6 years. Alison was extremely outgoing, very sporty before she got ill. Spent 10 years closeted in the house by herself, basically. Think COVID's bad? Try for 10 years. Travel was agony. She had full body neuralgia, so basically everything she did was painful. Right? We found out after eventually what was causing the problem. It was an unstable pelvis. So to get to this, it's financial doesn't come into it. No, it's great. I'm not going to give away watches either, but you have to have some form of recompense. But it is a very expensive. You can't call this a hobby.
It's not a hobby.
It's not a hobby.
I don't think you can do it right if you go at it as a hobby mentality.
Yeah.
You can make enamel jewelry. Because I said to my daughter, like over the summer, if she wanted to make enamel jewelry, like there was leftover silver or copper there, and she was like, yeah, whatever. And
No, a lot of what we'd hoped to do is steer people into not making the mistakes we did.
Yeah.
Buying stuff that we didn't need, expensive equipment that you don't actually need.
Yeah.
So
we went through a lot of pitfalls.
If someone gets to do this without having the financial loss of getting these products that you don't actually need to do it, it'd be great. And the more people that do this, the better, right? Watchmaking, they keep everything very close at hand and that, but there's loads of collectors out there. We're not looking for thousands of people to look for watches. We just want one person to want one watch and love it. And that's what makes Alison happy. I can completely say that.
Yeah, it is. And so as Mike said, you can't really give it away, but I'm not adding in time or but I enjoy it. And I think if a day comes where I don't enjoy it, well, then that's when I sell off my enamel stock to somebody else. But I'm glad that I've come here, that I'm, if anybody, like either here or in the future, wants to ask anything and they just, don't hit the oops, oh no, what have I done? And and can avoid some problems. I can't teach you, how to sand super slow or how to feel what I feel, but you can avoid the bigger problems that I came across.
There's an enamelist here, Jordan. We've talked.
Yeah.
I've already contacted a very good collector that loves enameling, and I'm going to put him in touch with him. He's already seen Jordan's stuff. So if I can help him, we didn't get that out, but if I can help him, it might bring him on and encouragement.
And that's what it's all about.
And that's what it's all about.
At the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Passion shining through, right?
So it's beautiful, obviously.
Thank you.
I'm curious, and since you just said that you were suggesting to your daughter the idea of the enamel jewelry, has anybody ever asked you to do like the watch style chain with one of your?
No.
How heavy are the watches?
Well, the dials themselves, these particular ones, they're not too heavy. My daughter does want all the duds. She's going to do some arty thing with them. And she's got a lot of choice, but there's a lot of pink in there. Somebody did, there is actually an enamel jewelry artist. She used to paint for Dresden Chinaware, and she went when she was, I don't know whether she left or was laid off with them, but she went and she's doing, she's on Instagram under Enamel Annette, and isn't it? Yeah, and is it Enamel? And she does. She's an amazing painter, and she makes enamel jewelry. And she uses white backgrounds, but she paints, and one of my favorite paintings is, Klimt's Gold era, and, Judith and The Kiss and those ones. She paints them by hand and fires them, and she makes the most stunning jewelry. So if I wanted to learn to make enamel jewelry, I think I'd be going over to Germany to her, or my daughter actually went on looking, and I said, she was going, maybe I might go, and I said, well, I think I'd have to ask her first. So yeah, I think there's better people than me to do that. But if somebody wants a watch dial as a pendant, I don't mind. We can just change the whole if you want.
Case, you would just have to have like a piece that could like kind of like
hinge like a pin. If it was cased, it might be heavy.
Okay.
Yeah, you might end up with serious neck muscles, especially with the heavier dials now and using the fine silver. They're going to be that much heavier, and adding on, even though we're taking a little bit out of the thickness of the new case, that dial is going to put the weight back in. So.
On the heels of that question, would you ever consider making accessories like cufflinks to go with a custom watch that would match?
It's been asked. Again, I'm not a jeweler. I would probably have to either get somebody to make the
that might want to do that.
Blank.
Somebody in this room might help that.
But yeah, it would be nice. Mike had thought of that. He actually said, because he said to me, he goes, oh, wouldn't cufflinks like in the blue midnight sky just look so nice with my, I said, you got the watch. I said, take your, like maybe just, count your chickens, don't. So yeah, no, it has been thought of.
So my question would be, what's the worst piece of equipment you've bought? What's the best piece of equipment you've bought? And then what is a piece of equipment that you've had to modify or make yourself to meet your goals?
Okay, in my opinion, the worst piece was the lapping machine, because I don't like it. The probably two bests would be the super little kiln. And the other thing I didn't mention, if you're going with a kiln, go with the Paragon, and make sure that you have one that has the thermostat already done onto it, and you can set, because all I have to do is go in and have it all set, and I just, as I say, fire it up for at least 2 hours. It's like heating your oven before you bake. The kiln would go hand in hand with the Schmid printer, but that was a very expensive piece of equipment, but it was an expensive piece of equipment that will be put hopefully to decades of use. As for the lapping machine, that's sitting in a corner gathering dust. The modifying, I'm really simple. I should say in the workshop. I don't know, am I simple up here as well for doing what I'm doing? But I've just modified like trivets to suit myself, and just little things.
One problem Alison was having was with dial feet positioning. So we got I got engineered pieces that would hold the dial and get exact.
It's like what I'm sanding on there. It's just, and my feet are sitting into that, and so I have no movement, and I can, just go so slow.
So instead of just trial and error, and a lot of the time being wrong and throwing out a piece that you've done a lot of work on, these just every single time you'd exact. So it just saves so much time.
One thing I didn't say as well is the last thing is that I don't polish my dials. So when you saw that picture with the green and it matted, and then you saw it after, that is the kiln finish. So I was doing what they call final fire finish, but until I met Vanessa, I didn't know what I was doing. And she goes, "Oh, you're doing final fire finish?" And I was going, "Am I? Oh, okay, that's what it's called." So so some colors will have more luster than others. The lead bearing have a better luster than the non, but it lets the colors speak for themselves as well. And then so I'm trying to not change the enamel too much. I'm letting it try to speak for itself.
There's texture on all the dials as opposed to if you lap it, it gives a full flat, very reflective
Even some
surface.
of them don't look like there's a texture, but there is a texture.
But there's no character on the surface then. Where transparent enamels, they put the character on the substrate and you can see through to it. Whereas these dials, the actual, it's on the surface. The character's on the surface.
Yeah. So.
I just have two questions.
Yeah.
One, when you started, you said that you tried silver. What kind of silver were you using?
999.
Fine silver.
Yeah, fine silver. It was just because I'd snookered myself on the finish thickness of the dials. You have to take into your 0.1 for your counter, your 0.5 mil for your substrate, and then all that you've got left to try and make that dial. And the silver was just not holding up. So with the new thickness, I can have just even 0.3 will give that extra rigidity, and it will hold up in the kiln.
You could.
Or you can use the full mil or even the 1.5 and recess down and recess the counter enamel and recess the front enamel. But I'll see what happens.
A lot of the time, if you do that with the dial, we wanted the dial as big as possible. So if you do that, you're going to have a lip on the edge. That means you have to make the bezel smaller, and you'll have a smaller dial. So it was better to have it on one piece.
Yeah.
How many firings do you do?
It depends on the color. So they can be between 3 and 5 firings. Now that might change with the heavier substrate, but at the moment with the 1 millimeter, I found that the substrate and the enamel, they're not taking more than 5, and that's on non-gold bearing. The gold bearing are less, often only 3. Yeah. And it also then depends on whether you wet pack or sieve. So yeah, in between 3 and 5. Yeah.
One of my questions was just answered. I was going to ask why you haven't used canister style dials. You know, just make a canister, but that's because you wanted to go all the way to the edge. You had a bigger dial.
Yeah. Yeah, my bezel actually goes right down onto the enamel. Our new case, our case maker, he said, oh, you don't want it like to go out and like that, so it doesn't touch the enamel, will not break. And I was like, no, I want it like down.
Plus the hands, when you see the hands on them, they're so close. Like there's no distance, they're just right over the enamel. So the tolerances are so tight on the hands over the enamel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you riveting the feet in?
No, I basically, you know what you were saying, just I have again the guy that did those other pieces for me. He did a recess one, and I put the cut and hand dressed blank into it, and I put another one in that, and that has the center hole mark, and it has where the feet marking, so it doesn't really matter. And once you get one foot right, then the second one, once one is done, then I get the second one.
It's tooling to hold.
How are you attaching
so it's basically a tiny drill bit in a pin vise. I put it into the hole and I give it 2 turns. And then I dress the end of my silver, and it's held with the third arm. I use soft solder, and they're just like that. So I do it by eye.
So you're soft soldering them in after?
No, before firing.
How is the soft solder holding on?
It is.
You can't do that.
All of our minds are racing right now. It's got to be October
3rd. I think it's maybe because of the way that I change my trivet to that mesh piece, and I sit my feet parallel, and also that each firing is literally between like 45, 50, 58 seconds. It barely goes over a minute, and I am literally like breath held, watch. I'm literally watching the different grains melting. As soon as sometimes I'm not even looking at the temperature rising, and it's just like it's done. Boom, out. And
the big thing on the dial feet coming off originally was the heat transfer from the holders. So you found by keeping the feet away from the holders, they wasn't getting heat transfer, and they weren't becoming loose or that. If they were getting heat transfer, they could just bend or fall off. So when she held them up with the basically, so
that
they
little
didn't,
that super
just a mesh.
Complicated bit of bent wire. Just I bent it in my tiny little vise with my, mallet, and that's. And getting shading.
And I've only broke a few tile feet of the holders.
Yeah. So since then, I haven't lost any feet.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are you using flux then?
No, I use it's a pre-done soft solder in a syringe. The premix. I don't use any flux. Just your substrate has to be spotless.
Right. So it starts as a liquid.
Yeah,
And then you'll
it's
see it?
literally, and I take it out with I had like a tiny brooch, and a circular brooch, and I very technical, and I just like push up the syringe, take a tiny bit out. I have it down now. I was putting too much on at the start or too little, so I have it sorted down, and it's just. So my dial is here, my foot is sitting down, and it's just a tiny bit, and I have my super technical blowtorch just literally as soon as it melts, I let go of the arm, pick it up, and straight into a separate basin, and then I go again then, and I obviously, because you're going to have fire scale all over it again, so it's sanding, marking the next foot, pickling, and doing another one. I know it sounds a very laborious type of way, but it's been working for me, so I'm sort of going to stick with.
It's not hard solder either.
No, it's soft solder.
Soft lead.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about the graphics then?
The dial graphics?
The
printing graphics?
Yes.
Yeah, so Mike,
for the dial graphics, to get them exactly right, this was all printing and cliches and that. I contacted a company in Switzerland. I'm from Ireland. Didn't want to know, as usual, but they did put me in touch with a company in the UK, and they do our graphics. So I give them a design. He'll do the graphics for me, and whatever changes, we get the graphics right, and he'll do the cliche for me. And then that's the pad printing process then.
So you send it to him?
We send it to them, and they'll do it for us.
But a lot of times what we see on the computer when he's done up, when the cliche comes, as Dennis said, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It
doesn't correlate. It doesn't.
We have a very expensive drawer of cliches that we can't use.
Yeah.
So that was a big learning curve as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Still learning that.
Yeah, we're still learning it.
Dennis is my newest best friend.
Mike's new best friend.
Alison, we are 100% convinced it is either 100% black magic or you're living right. One of the two. So, any other questions?
I'm sorry, I know you get this question a lot.
It's okay.
Any aspirations to work on cloisonne?
I hope to, yeah. When I think I'm worthy and get a bit better. I don't know if I'm a good enough enamelist yet to, but I loved making hairsprings, so I was sort of thinking, well, it's sort of similar, really, isn't it? It's just gold wire, and but it's coming up with designs because
a little push.
Yeah, so maybe I might drag my daughter into that one. It'd be like, hey, maybe you might come up with a design, and I could get her into it that way, because I'm a bit sort of stunted when it comes to design-wise. But I would love to. Yeah, I would love to. When I'm grown and older.
Once you figure out all the problems with that, you're not going to know what to do with yourself. You have to start off with something else. You got to learn all over again.
Yeah, and I'll be more grey.
Yeah.
And more hobbled.
Early on, you mentioned using half-mil copper. Did you use that throughout your experimentation? Your final dials are still using half-millimeter copper?
Yes, yeah, the ones in these watches, yeah, they're on half-mil. Yeah. Okay.
And lastly, what was, you had connected with Vanessa on Instagram. What is her last name?
Lecci, Lecci. Is it enamel?
Enamel I'll get it for you.
Yeah, Michael sent it on to you. Her work is fabulous.
There's some fabulous enamels out there.
There really are. Really is.
But a lot of them are working for the big companies, and they don't share any work or that. Vanessa only went independent in the last few years. She set up the workshop for a large company.
She's just outside Neuchâtel in Peso, and like she does
works,
workshops. And I did ask her. I said, "Should I come along and do a workshop?" And she was like, "No." She says, "Like you're way beyond my workshop." And I'm like, "What?"
Have you seen the world thing for Patek Philippe? That's her. That's hers. Oh, wow. She did that. She does the stuff for Michel Parmigiani for his birthday every year. So her enameling is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just an FYI for anybody that wants to learn anything about enameling that I'm aware of, there's a place called Thompson Enameling in Bellevue, Kentucky, just over the river from downtown Cincinnati, and they have cloisonné classes and enameling classes and sell all kinds of supplies. You can Google them, find them on Google, and see what type of stuff they have. They've had instructors from Russia there in the past that they've sponsored, and so that might be something to look into for anybody as well as you. We found out about it originally. A past president of AWCI owns it now, bought it from the company, and it's one of the last places, if not the last place in the United States that sells enameling supplies. And he was looking into repairing enamel dials in pocket watches. And the issue that came into play there was the different colors in the watches, because they all had to be fired at different temperatures.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, they all run together, and then you get a whole big old mess. But so anyways, but just a quick comment. I went to WOSTEP, watchmaking school, back in the 90s, and we toured lots of different companies, and one of the places we toured was an enamel dial company. They supposedly repaired enamel dials, but what they did, you would send your own dial in and they'd make a whole new dial. And one of the main artists that they had working for them was an autistic kid that was super, super talented. And they would paint the different colors on there, but they had to do them one at a time, and they just had a double or triple level pizza oven that they heated it all up in. So anyways, that's just my comments.
Brilliant.
This is a question mainly for Jason Champion there. I listened to the 14 hours of sanding by hand. And isn't it possible to use a soft buff and like a yellow rouge or something and do that on a dial? Because I took a class from Tom Shoemaker. I think we took a stylus and we got kinks out of like painted Rolex dials, and then we kind of polished them. Burnisher. Yeah, so it's a lacquer dial, but that's a lot harder than. That's not nearly as hard as a fired ceramic, a fired enamel would be, and that would. Could you polish it up that way instead of 12 or 14 hours of sanding? Just trying to save you some time.
Yeah, it's the flatness and it's also like you're sanding, different grades of glass, and maybe I could do it faster, but when I did try it faster, they didn't come out
the lapping
the
machine
same way.
Will do it very
lapping,
quickly.
Yeah, but we
it
just
won't
didn't
have the same finish.
I didn't get the same results. Now I might in the future. I might figure that one out, but that's all part of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a burnishing process. It's a little bit different than a sanding process, and a different hardness, but yeah, it is a chamois. Yeah, it's just a chamois cloth.
Like you're going to have, it's not going to be flat.
Not nearly like that.
No.
Yeah. And it's a small surface area to remove a small mark, not a full dial.
Yeah, this is a 37 millimeter circle.
You got a question over here. Matt, you had a question, right? No, I have a question.
Yeah, but but then I do final fire finish. You have to. It has to be spotless. Like the things that you will get if it's not spotless, and you put it in, and you'll get that sanded finish, and you think that it's spotless. But if I don't have it spotless, and there's any contaminants, you'll end up with pitting, bubbling, undulations, separations. The list goes on. I've had them all, and this is just the way that I found that I don't get that problem. Now, I'm not saying that I don't have problems, but if I'm getting a dialum 1, or I've only had to go twice or a third, I think that's that's good odds when you're doing them by hand, one at a go.
Anyone else?
But again, I wouldn't call myself an expert. So somebody always knows more than you in the room.
That's okay. We would, so it's okay. All right. Thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.